saw my own face staring from his briefcase. Morning light used to feel soft in our kitchen. The smell of coffee, the rhythm of the clock, the gentle clatter of dishes. It was the music of safety. I'm 59, and for most of my life, this house was a map of trust. My son Daniel would hum while buttoning his shirt, kiss my cheek without thinking, and leave his briefcase by the chair as he always did. Routine is a kind of faith. You stop questioning it when it holds. That morning, the briefcase slipped from his hand. Papers scattered like frightened birds across the tiled floor. I bent down, smiling at his clumsiness, until my eyes caught a sheet that didn't belong. My breath stopped. My face, my own face, stared up at me from the page. Beneath it, bold letters spelled one impossible word: wanted. The air thickened, light bending strangely across the room. The edges of the poster curled inward, as though trying to hide itself. My name was printed below the photograph, clear, official, real. The smell of coffee turned bitter in my throat. I touched the page, feeling the smooth gloss where ink met skin, and my reflection shifted across it, ghost-like. "Daniel," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. "What is this?" He froze halfway to the door. His voice came tight, defensive. "It's nothing. Just something from work." "Work?" My tone barely carried. "Then why does it have my picture?" He turned. The look he gave me didn't belong to a son. It was the stare of someone calculating what to admit and what to bury. "You wouldn't understand," he said. I laughed, too sharp, too sudden. "Try me." He reached for the poster, but I pulled it back. The light hit his face. For a moment, I saw the boy who once asked me to hold his hand crossing the street. Then the moment broke. He stepped closer, voice low. "You shouldn't have seen that." The warmth in the kitchen collapsed into silence. Even the clock hesitated between ticks. My pulse filled the room. "You're hiding something," I whispered. "Something about me." He looked at me like a stranger, eyes blank, mouth set. "It's complicated," he said again, and walked out, leaving the door ajar and the morning unbreathing. I sat down on the cold floor, the poster trembling between my fingers. The light from the window spilled across it, catching the curve of my printed smile, that familiar tilt of the head from an old driver's photo. Beneath it, the accusation, a date, an address, a reference number that meant nothing yet felt like a countdown. I thought of the mirror above the fireplace, how it always reflected the same corner of the kitchen where Daniel and I shared breakfasts, arguments, quiet jokes. Now even that reflection felt suspect. The house had shifted, same walls, different meaning. Every surface was suddenly capable of deceit. I folded the poster, edges perfectly aligned, and slipped it into an envelope. My hands moved without thought, ritual steadying me where truth faltered. A vow formed in my throat, silent but solid. I will find out who printed this and why my son carried it. Outside, a car door slammed. His engine started. The briefcase, lighter now, sat by the chair, still open, still breathing secrets. The light from the window struck it again, scattering across the metal clasp like a warning. I rose slowly, the floor cold beneath bare feet. Betrayal doesn't announce itself. It arrives disguised as routine. I looked once more at the doorway he had just walked through, the air still trembling where he'd been. The house exhaled, and for the first time, it didn't feel like home. He looked at me like a stranger. He closed the door without a sound. It was a small sound, really, barely a click, but it cut deeper than shouting ever could. The house exhaled after he left, a hollow draft through every room. The air felt heavier lately, like the space itself had started listening and refusing to speak back. The days followed him out that door, one by one, until quiet became the only company that stayed. At first, I told myself he was tired. Long hours at work, new responsibilities, late-night deadlines. But tired men don't hide their phones when their mothers walk in. They don't whisper into the dark with voices turned sideways, words smothered by pillows. His greetings had shrunk, once a hug, then a nod, then nothing at all. I poured 2 cups of coffee every morning out of habit. One went cold beside his empty chair. The other burned my tongue because I refused to wait. The sound of the spoon against porcelain became a heartbeat in the silence, steady but useless. "Daniel," I said one evening, standing by the doorframe as he scrolled through his phone, "who keeps you awake at night?" He didn't look up. "You wouldn't understand." A pause. "Try me." His thumbs froze mid-scroll, and for a heartbeat I saw guilt flicker in his reflection on the black screen. Then the phone went dark, and so did his face. "I've got work," he muttered, brushing past. The scent of his cologne lingered for a moment before fading into nothing. I stayed there, hand on the door he'd just closed, this time with a sound sharp and final. The next day, I decided to see for myself what work looked like. I brought lunch to his office, pretending it was a surprise. When I entered, conversations died mid-sentence. Paper rustled too quickly, eyes darted elsewhere. His assistant smiled thinly, hands folding the wrong stack of files. "Daniel's in a meeting," she said, voice tight. "He can't see you right now." "He doesn't know I'm here," I answered, just as tight. "But he'll know why soon enough." She nodded, relief hidden behind politeness. I left before the tears came. Outside, the city hummed its usual rhythm. Car horns, footsteps, the faint buzz of neon. But even that sound felt distant, like hearing a memory instead of a street. A friend from the bakery caught me halfway down the block. "They're talking about you again," she whispered. Her voice trembled, as if kindness might be mistaken for betrayal. "Some nonsense about an old case, your name on it. Don't believe everything you hear." My throat tightened. "Who's saying it?" She shook her head. "Just people." The walk home felt longer than usual, every step echoing against closed doors and half-glimpsed faces behind curtains. The neighborhood had begun to hum differently, a rumor-shaped tune. That night, his phone buzzed at midnight. I listened from the hall, the faint vibration against wood, the soft whisper of a message sent. He laughed once, quietly. I memorized that sound. Laughter used to mean safety. Now, it was evidence. I sat at the kitchen table, writing a letter I never intended to send. "I don't know who you are anymore. I don't know what they told you or what you've started to believe, but the silence is louder than any accusation, and it's beginning to change the shape of our home." I sealed the letter and placed it beside the coffee cup he never touched. The clock ticked past 2, then 3, the rhythm merciless. The next morning, he didn't take the letter. He didn't take the cup. He didn't even glance toward me. And that's when I understood. Some silences aren't born of peace. They are built, piece by piece, to bury someone quietly. The silence began to accuse me. Someone was keeping accounts of me. It began with a sound, a faint scrape from the kitchen drawer that shouldn't have been open. I thought it was a mouse, or maybe just the drawer shifting with age, but when I pulled it out, something resisted. Beneath the faded recipe cards and unpaid bills lay a thin ledger, folded tight as if hiding shame. The paper felt rough, like it had lived longer than it should have. The handwriting wasn't mine. Still, my name was there, written in neat blue ink across the top of the page. Rows of numbers followed, disciplined and precise. $4,200 transferred, $900 withdrawn. Total, $5,100. Each line item carried a date I recognized, days when I'd trusted his explanations about small payments or temporary fixes. My stomach turned cold. Money doesn't lie. It records. At the bank, the clerk looked younger than my son, nervous behind her polite smile. "I need to review some transactions," I said, trying to sound steady. She nodded, typing quickly, the soft clicks of her keyboard filling the silence. Her eyes darted between the monitor and me. "You've had several transfers," she said carefully, "mostly from a shared account." "Shared?" I leaned closer. "With whom?" She hesitated, the faint hum of the air conditioner replacing her voice. It appears with someone authorized. There's a secondary signature. My pulse thudded against the counter. Can I see it? She printed the document, pages warm and smelling faintly of toner. I smoothed them flat, tracing the familiar loops of his handwriting beneath mine. The ink looked rushed, almost trembling, as if guilt had a rhythm. I stared at the page. $4,200, $900. Total, $5,100. The numbers might as well have been scars. "He's my son," I whispered. "Are you certain it was him?" She looked down, sympathetic but professional. "The authorization reference is clear," she said quietly. "It matches the same entry ID used on the previous withdrawal." That word, authorization, burned. To authorize is to consent, to trust, to sign yourself into someone else's betrayal. On my way out, the bank's glass doors reflected my face back at me. The reflection looked tired, older than it had that morning. I could see the tremor in my hand as I held the ledger close, fingers brushing the paper's coarse edge. Outside, the city carried on, horns, footsteps, fragments of life I wasn't part of anymore. I walked toward home, the weight of the document pressing into my palm like proof I didn't want. Each page scraped against the next, a dry whisper of truth trying to surface. At the kitchen table, I spread everything out, the receipts, the statements, the ledger. Patterns formed where affection used to be. He'd been moving money for months, maybe longer, little by little, quiet theft disguised as maintenance, help, care. I counted again, though the numbers wouldn't change, each total cut deeper. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. The sound filled the silence, steady and cruel. Every tick another confession. I had missed it, ignored it, believed him. By dusk, I was writing figures on a separate sheet, tracing his path line by line. 2 signatures, 1 house, no trust left. When the phone rang, I let it. I couldn't bear to hear his voice. I folded the ledger carefully and placed it inside an envelope, the same way you might handle ashes. My thumb caught on a paper edge. It sliced shallow, but bled fast. The sting felt honest, at least. I whispered to no one, "This isn't a misunderstanding." It was orchestration. Planned, practiced, executed. The next morning, the bank called back. "We've frozen the shared account," the clerk said, "until further verification." I thanked her. My voice didn't sound like mine. The line went silent for a beat, and in that pause, I understood something that no statement could record. The bank froze what was left of me. He lied, but the reason was sharper than hate. The officer came at dusk when the air outside smelled faintly of rain and ash. His knock was soft but deliberate. 3 times. Then silence. I opened the door to find a man in uniform holding a thick brown envelope. His badge caught a flicker of porch light, dull but undeniable. "Ma'am," he said, "you might want to sit down before you read this." I didn't. I just stared at the envelope. The top corner was stamped in red. Case Ref 41B. My fingers hesitated, then broke the seal. Inside was a printed report, black and white, official, lifeless except for one thing. My name, listed beside a crime I didn't commit. "Fraud investigation," I whispered. The words tasted like dust. "Filed under my son's company." He nodded, expression unreadable. "You're listed as the secondary beneficiary on several false claims. It looks like internal fraud, but your name's there. If you don't respond, the court assumes consent." I couldn't move. The scent of burnt paper hung in the room, faint but unmistakable. It reminded me of the night years ago when my husband burned old tax forms in the backyard. Paper curling, details vanishing before they could be questioned. "Who filed it?" I asked. The officer glanced away, then back at me. "His colleague came forward this morning, said your son did it to protect you. He didn't want your account investigated, so he redirected the blame. It kept you off the primary list, for now." Protect me. The words twisted in my stomach. Protection shouldn't feel like strangulation. He said quietly, "It's not my place to judge intentions, But once this enters the court system, protection stops being protection. I folded the report, forcing the paper into neat halves it didn't deserve. The ink smelled faintly metallic. My hands smelled like smoke. So, he destroyed my name to save it? The officer hesitated. I think he thought he was sparing you, but the record's official now. You'll need counsel. Fast. Who gave you this? He lifted his hand slightly. I'm just the messenger, but the system won't wait long. The phrase stuck. The system won't wait long. When he left, the air felt colder, heavier. I sat by the kitchen table, staring at the badge reflection still trembling in the window. The envelope lay open beside me, its paper edges lifting as if exhaling regret. The phone rang once, twice. I didn't answer. I already knew whose voice would wait on the other side of silence. Later that night, a message arrived. Anonymous, but familiar. The tone was clipped, almost rehearsed. Mom, it's complicated. I'll fix it. Just stay quiet. Quiet. That word again. His favorite weapon. I whispered to the empty room, You can't fix what you broke by pretending it was for love. My eyes caught the small seal at the bottom of the document. Verification ID 14C7. Real, traceable, permanent. No denial could erase it now. I gathered the papers back into the envelope and sealed it shut. The smell of burnt paper clung to my hands. The uniformed man's warning replayed in my head like an echo I couldn't shake. This will reach the court if you don't act. I walked to the mirror, the one above the mantel where light still flickered from the nearby lamp. My reflection looked both foreign and familiar. Someone cornered, someone waking up. He lied, yes. But lies have flavors, and his was bittersweet. He thought he was protecting me from shame, from exposure. But protection built on deceit is just another kind of punishment. The envelope sat on the counter, its weight unnatural for mere paper. I touched it once more, whispering to no one but myself. Protection had turned into punishment. Every signature was a weapon. The paper trembled slightly as I placed it on the desk, though my hand was steady. The room was warm, yet the air felt cold, an artificial chill from the old ceiling fan spinning above the notary's head. The document was short, impersonal, and final, an access limitation notice, one sheet of paper that drew a border between love and law. The notary cleared her throat. You're certain about this? I've never been more certain, I said. My voice cracked on the word, never. She stamped the page with one firm motion. The sound was sharp, echoing like a gavel. The ink shimmered briefly, catching the light before drying into permanence. A wall had been built. One line, one seal, one choice at a time. I slipped the document into an envelope and felt the faint warmth fade from my hands. When I left, the air outside cut against my face. It wasn't winter yet, but the world already felt frozen. Back home, his car wasn't there. The silence felt heavier now, like absence had become furniture. I set the envelope on the kitchen counter where the briefcase used to sit and stared at it until the sun disappeared. By evening, the retaliation began. My phone lit up with messages, screenshots, whispers, words twisted to fit a story I didn't write. He'd posted something online, a half-truth that bled like poison through our circle. She's lost it, one comment read. He's doing his best. Another, money changes people. I turned the phone face down, heart thudding. Betrayal had gone public. What had once been a private fracture now stood under streetlights. When the retired judge called that night, I almost didn't answer. Her voice was calm, deliberate, wrapped in the kind of patience only years in court could teach. I've read the filing, she said. You did what needed doing. The truth needs its own timing. Don't chase it. Let it arrive. I didn't want it to come to this, I whispered. It always comes to this, she replied softly, when love stops respecting limits. Her words hung in the air long after the call ended. I sat by the window, watching fog press against the glass. The temperature in the house dropped, or Maybe I just noticed it for the first time. My breath came out visible, proof that warmth was leaving. I gathered the documents I'd received over the last week, the notice, the statements, the correspondence. Stacked together, they formed something unrecognizable. It wasn't a family anymore. It was evidence. Each paper had its own pulse, each stamp, a heartbeat. The rhythm replaced the one I used to hear when he walked through the door. By midnight, a new post appeared online. My photograph, taken at the bank weeks earlier, paired with a caption too cruel to read twice. The comments multiplied, each one colder than the last. I sat on the floor beside the radiator that refused to warm. My hands ached from clutching the pen that had drawn this boundary, the same pen that once signed birthday cards, permission slips, and letters that ended with "Love, Mom." Now it signed separation. At dawn, I heard tires on gravel. His car returned, slow and deliberate. The sound made my pulse tighten. He came inside without a word, looked at the envelope on the counter and smiled. A quiet, poisonous smile. "So this is what you think fixes us?" he said. "This," I replied, "is what protects me." He stepped closer. "You think paper keeps me out?" "No," I said, forcing air into my lungs, "but it keeps me standing." He looked at the envelope again, then at the walls as if calculating what still belonged to him. "You can hide behind all the papers you want," he murmured, voice low and venomous. "But I'll take what's mine. You can't lock me out forever." His words lingered after he walked out. The door shut hard enough to shake the window glass. The stack of documents on the table swayed but held. I pressed my hand to the cold surface, tracing the edge of the final signature. The paper felt heavier than any weapon I'd ever known. He vowed to take the house next. They called to question my reflection. It started with a photograph, mine again, but this time it wasn't tucked in a briefcase or stamped on a document. It was everywhere, shared, reposted, captioned with lies that grew legs faster than truth could crawl. My face became a headline, my name, a question mark. I remember the first call that morning. The line cracked with static, a journalist's voice breaking through. "We'd like your comment on the embezzlement hearing," he said. The word embezzlement landed like a slap. My reflection in the kitchen window blurred with the morning light. I didn't recognize myself anymore, just an outline held together by rumors. By noon, they'd already printed my story without asking for it. Online articles, each one quoting sources close to the family. I scrolled until my hands shook. Every paragraph built a stranger out of me. I could see my son's shadow in each twist of the narrative, his name never mentioned, his guilt perfectly redacted. The summons arrived by evening, a defamation hearing scheduled in 2 days. The letterhead gleamed with authority, crisp and final. I held it up to the window, the paper thin, enough for the light to bleed through. It felt less like justice, more like exposure. The day of the hearing, the courthouse steps were lined with cameras. Flashes erupted as soon as I stepped from the car. The light stung my face, sharp and unrelenting, like being interrogated by the sun itself. "Did you really vanish with company funds?" someone shouted. I stopped mid-step. "No," I said, though I knew the microphones would carve that single word into whatever shape they needed. Inside, the room buzzed with quiet hostility. The journalists whispered, pens poised, eyes hungry. My witness, a friend from years ago, sat behind me, steady as a lighthouse. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear. "She was framed. The documents were falsified. She has proof. But proof travels slowly when headlines run on adrenaline." The opposing side leaned back, lips curled in quiet amusement. I could feel the weight of every glance pressing into my back. Truth, I realized, doesn't shout. It waits. It bleeds out softly, one line at a time, while lies perform. During recess, I caught my reflection again, this time in the courtroom's glass partition. The light was harsher now, fluorescent, unforgiving. My face looked older, drawn tight by exhaustion, but my eyes My eyes still held the vow I'd made the night I found that first poster. I will not vanish. Outside, a reporter approached, microphone trembling in her hand. "You don't have to answer," she said quietly. "But if you could tell the world one thing, what would it be?" I met her gaze. "That silence isn't guilt," I said. "It's survival." She blinked, taken aback. The camera's red light blinked, waiting, feeding. I turned away before the question came again. Back home, the window caught the late afternoon sun, throwing long stripes of light across the floor. Dust floated through it, gentle and golden. The same window I'd once cleaned every morning now watched me like a witness, neutral, reflective, tired. I sat beneath it, scrolling once more through the storm of articles. My photo, always the same one, tilted slightly, eyes looking off camera as if caught in a secret. Someone had written beneath it, "She doesn't look guilty. That's how you know she is." The cruelty was efficient, anonymous, modern. I powered the phone off and pressed my palm to the glass, feeling the faint warmth of the setting light. My name might have been rewritten, but my reflection still answered to me. In this new world, truth wasn't the headline. It was the quiet persistence that survived beneath it. Tomorrow, they'll print my verdict before the court does. Family became arithmetic. The lawyer's office smelled of dust and ink, a place where secrets dried slowly between paper and silence. The single candle on the desk burned low, its flame uneven, alive on one side, dying on the other. I sat across from him, the gastati, parchment spread before us, each sheet a confession disguised as paperwork. 4 assets, 2 signatures, 1 forged. The numbers sat quietly at first, polite and harmless, until I followed their columns to the end. $82,000, gone, reappearing under a different name, under his name. The lawyer cleared his throat, tapping the page gently, as though afraid it might bleed. "Here," he said, tracing the looping script. "You see this flourish on the M? That's not yours." I nodded, but the truth had already struck. My son had borrowed my hand without permission. The letters curved like affection, the kind that deceives softly before it cuts deep. A distant cousin, acting as my protector, stood near the window. "He mortgaged the house behind your back," he said quietly. "The deed was processed 3 months ago." I blinked. 3 months? He nodded once. "While you were still defending his name in court." The candle's flame wavered then, a small tremor of light against the parchment. I touched the edge of the deed, rough beneath my fingertips, the texture carrying more betrayal than the words themselves. "He used my name," I whispered, "my home." "He used your faith," the cousin corrected, voice steady but kind. "Faith leaves the easiest signatures." The lawyer pushed a pen toward me. "You'll need to initial each correction. We can contest the transfer, but it'll take time." Time. That word had become currency, spent carelessly by those who never earned it. I signed where he pointed, the ink dragging across paper like a reluctant confession. My initials looked foreign beside the forged ones, mine small, deliberate, his sweeping, confident, unashamed. For years I had thought love was inheritance, something passed down, protected, multiplied. But in that dim room, love had become subtraction. 4 assets reduced to 3, a son reduced to a stranger. "Will I lose the house?" I asked. The lawyer hesitated. "Not if we move fast." My cousin placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "He's already lost something more," he murmured. I wanted to believe him, but the numbers didn't lie. They rarely did. They only sat in stillness, waiting for someone brave enough to read what they meant. Outside, a gust of wind pressed against the window pane. The candle leaned toward the draft, flame stretching, defiant for a moment, before settling back into its shallow pool of wax. I stared at the documents again. Deeds that once proved belonging now testified against it. Each line item, each date, each signature whispered the same arithmetic. Family minus trust equals ruin. The lawyer gathered the papers into a single folder. "We'll file an injunction first thing tomorrow," he said. "The sooner, the cleaner the cut." His words lodged in my chest. Clean cuts heal. This one would scar. As I left the office, the air outside smelled of rain and smoke. My hand brushed the folder, the paper inside uneven beneath its cover. The candle's scent lingered faintly on the pages, a mix of wax and something burnt, something gone. At home, I laid the folder on the table beside an old photograph of us both smiling, arms linked before the debts and lies. I could still trace the resemblance between our signatures and our faces, how both had started in love and ended in imitation. The house was silent, too silent. I lit another candle, smaller than the one in the office. Its light flickered, fought, then steadied. For a moment, I thought of him, the boy who once believed a promise meant forever, not collateral. But memory, too, can be mortgaged. The flame bent sharply, then dimmed, its glow falling over the forged line of his name. The light went out when he signed again. The walls started remembering. When the officers arrived, I thought they'd come for another statement, another line for another file. But one of them, a quiet man with tired eyes, said softly, "We need to check your vents." His tone wasn't suspicion. It was certainty. Within minutes, the screwdriver turned, metal groaned, and truth fell out of my ceiling. A small black camera, dust-covered, wired straight through the frame. The silence that followed felt like a verdict. He crouched, turning the device in his gloved hand. "It's been recording for months," he murmured. "Each file is time-stamped. We'll need to take it in for chain of custody." Months. The word hit harder than any blow. Every night I'd sat in this room crying or whispering to myself had become a performance for an unseen audience. My private grief was public property. Another officer called from the hallway. "There's one in the kitchen vent, too." The sound of screws twisting free echoed through the house, a hollow, metallic rhythm. It was the sound of memory being unburied. I stood still, unable to breathe. "He recorded me," I said, my voice catching. The first officer nodded. "And edited the files. You'll hear your voice, but not in your words." He offered me a pair of headphones linked to a small device. "You don't have to listen right now," he added. But I did. I had to. The first clip began with static. Then my voice, sharp, unfamiliar, spilled out. "I did it. I took it all. Spliced, cut, rearranged." "That's not me," I whispered. He nodded again. "We know. It's a fabrication, but it'll take time to prove it in digital forensics." The recording continued, each second peeling away the illusion of safety I once had. The sound of my own breath, distorted, looped into something monstrous. Every pause, every sigh, twisted into guilt. I pulled the headphones off. "Turn it off." The room seemed to tilt. My reflection in the mirror across the living room stared back, pale and distant. Behind it, I noticed another, small hole near the curtain rod. Another camera lens, tiny, hidden behind fabric. The officer followed my gaze. "That one's live," he said quietly. He climbed the chair and cut the wire with a single motion. The curtain dropped, heavy and final. I felt the house exhale. For months, I'd felt watched. By eyes I couldn't name, by judgment I couldn't escape. Now I knew why the walls hummed when I cried, why I'd wake to faint clicks in the night. The walls had been remembering, not with empathy, but obedience. My ally from the precinct, the one who'd believed me when no one else did, stayed after the others packed up. "We'll trace the network," she promised. "Find where the footage went." "Do you think he sent it out?" I asked. She looked toward the unplugged wires. "If he filmed you, he wanted an audience." The weight of her words settled like dust over everything. The furniture, the silence, my pulse. I walked through the house slowly, touching each surface, each scar of intrusion. The air vents, the sockets, the picture frames, all of them felt complicit. My home had been rewritten into evidence, In the corner of the living room, the candle from weeks ago still sat unlit, its wax layered with dust. I struck a match and let the flame breathe for a moment. It flickered, gentle, wounded, alive. The light reflected in the glass of the broken lens on the table, bending the room into strange angles. "I used to think walls kept things safe," I whispered. "Now I know. They just keep things hidden." The officer packed the final camera into a small evidence bag marked with reference code 87F. "We'll contact you tomorrow," she said. As she left, the door clicked shut behind her. The sound lingered, a seal, a promise. I sat in the quiet that followed, and for the first time, it wasn't my enemy. The air felt still, empty, real. Then I saw it. One last cable snaking from beneath the carpet, leading to the wall outlet near the hallway. I followed it, hands trembling, until I reached the final plug. My reflection caught in the window as I pulled it free. The lights dimmed slightly. He had filmed every word I tried to forget. He used my name to raise a ghost. The civil officer laid the folder on the table as if it might wake something sleeping. Its edges were soft with handling, but the paper inside was too fresh, too clean to belong to truth. The ink still held the faint smell of damp toner, like rain left behind by deceit. "Take a look," he said quietly. The folder opened, and there it was. An application form bearing my name, my birth date, even my old address. But below it, a signature I didn't recognize. Neat, practiced, deliberate. He'd created another me. "Your son filed this 6 months ago," the officer continued, "registered under dependent status, category 42A. The number meant nothing, but the implication did. A forged identity, built under the shelter of family law, where loyalty can be weaponized and paperwork bleeds affection. My ally from the legal board, the arbiter who had been guiding me through the chaos, leaned forward. "Forgery under kinship protection clause," she said firmly. "He thought using blood would shield him." Her tone wasn't cruel, it was exhausted. Justice, even when it stands beside you, sighs. I stared at the printed name. The letters were perfect, balanced. My own handwriting trembles, but his was steady. He'd learned to forge calmness. "Why would he need a second version of you?" the officer asked. "To erase the first," I said. "To claim what she left behind." The air thickened. Somewhere down the corridor, a printer whirred again, spitting out more evidence for someone else's story. The scent of ink sharpened, filling the room with a sterile ache. The officer slid a second document across the desk. A photograph. A government-issued ID. Same name, same face, digitally reconstructed from an old passport image. I stared at the picture, my features slightly distorted by a newer algorithm. Younger, smoother, a version of me that didn't age, didn't grieve, didn't resist. He had built an echo. The arbiter folded her hands. "We'll file the counter notice by end of day. The court date will be announced within 72 hours. 72 hours? I repeated softly, as if testing the sound of waiting. She nodded. "Justice prepares its own vocabulary. You just have to speak it clearly when the time comes." I looked again at the fake ID. Beneath my printed face was his signature. Guardian. That word had once meant protector. Now it meant thief. He hadn't stolen my money this time. He'd stolen my meaning. As we left the office, the afternoon light hit the building's glass facade, throwing our reflections in fragments across the wall. Two figures, real and reflected, walking side by side, both flickering between truth and imitation. In the parking lot, the arbiter paused. "You should know something," she said. "The forgery wasn't perfect. He made one mistake." "What mistake?" She opened the folder again, tapping the bottom corner of the form. "He listed your age as 48. A breath left me, half laugh, half disbelief. Even his lies refused to let me grow old. She smiled faintly. "That might be what saves you." Back home, I placed the copy of the forged application on my desk beside the real documents: birth certificate, marriage license, property deeds. They all looked the same now, their authority blurring under the weight of repetition. Proof had become a performance. The faint smell of ink lingered in the air, mixed with the older scent of paper. My scent. History's. I traced my finger over the printed name and whispered, "You wanted me gone so badly you made another me to bury." Outside, the wind pushed at the shutters, making them creak like old breath. I felt the echo again, the ghost he'd conjured walking just behind me, polite, silent, approved. The arbiter's message came through later that night. Hearing set for Tuesday, 10 a.m., bring originals. I folded the forged ID into an envelope. Its surface still smelled faintly of glue and betrayal. The stakes had shifted. This wasn't about property or signatures anymore. It was about existence. When I turned off the light, I saw the false ID reflecting faintly from the desk, catching the last glow of the lamp before fading into shadow. My name was about to testify against itself. Crowds wait to see who I am. The courtroom hums before it begins, the air dense with whispers and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Rows of strangers lean forward, waiting to decide my worth. I can feel the weight of their eyes before I even speak, eyes that have already chosen sides. The officer leads me to the bench. The wood is cold beneath my hand, smooth from years of verdicts and confessions. I catch my reflection in the glass partition ahead, pale, exhausted, but still standing. The prosecutor rises. "State your name for the record." I do. My voice sounds distant, but steady. The court reporter's fingers move quickly across the keys, preserving every syllable like it's evidence. To my left, my witness sits quietly, an old friend who once believed justice was paperwork, not endurance. He holds his folder close, as if truth needs guarding. The prosecutor begins, flipping through the pages. "You claim your identity was forged, your assets stolen, and your reputation defamed. Do you have proof?" My witness stands. "I do," he says, voice clear. "Reference file JH11, digital verification, institutional chain confirmed." He hands over the transcript. The clerk takes it to the judge. The paper rustles, thin and sharp, slicing through the room's silence. Then the prosecutor lifts a poster, the one I'd seen months ago, stapled to a city wall. My face printed beside the word, "Wanted." The letters still bruise the air when I look at them. "This was circulated by your son," the prosecutor says, "claiming you'd disappeared after misappropriating funds." The audience murmurs. A few heads shake, others lean in closer. Under the harsh white light, their disbelief looks almost identical to pity. "I did not vanish," I say softly. "I was erased." The court reporter's keys clatter faster. The phrase will live forever in transcript form. Line 114, entry 38A. My witness adds, "The account transfers match her son's signature. Every date aligns with his forged filings." The prosecutor doesn't argue, he only tilts his head. "Yet you stayed silent all this time?" Silence was the only thing left that was mine. The crowd stirs. Someone coughs. The judge shifts slightly, the gavel handle tapping once against the bench. That sound, small, deliberate, anchors me. The fluorescent light above flickers. Its hum feels almost sentient, a kind of cold halo that refuses warmth. My eyes sting from it, but I keep them open. I need to watch the truth unfold, even if it blinds me. Across the room, he sits. My son. His tie perfectly straight, his posture unshaken. When our eyes meet, his expression is unreadable. He's rehearsed this moment, perhaps longer than I have. The prosecutor gestures toward him. The defense claims miscommunication, not malice, a misunderstanding within the family. I laugh once, quiet but bitter. Forgery isn't a misunderstanding. It's a decision. The arbiter glances up from her notes, meeting my gaze for just a moment. A silent affirmation that I'm not alone. My ally's hand brushes the edge of the table, a subtle signal. Hold steady. I trusted him, I continue. I raised him to know right from wrong. I didn't realize how easily love could be notarized, copied, and filed under another name. The judge exhales. The air hums again. Outside the window, faint daylight pushes through the frosted glass. Light filtered, sterile, unkind. I wonder how many trials that same light has watched, how many names it's seen broken before they were believed. The prosecutor sets the poster aside. You understand, he says, that this proceeding will determine who legally owns your identity. I understand, I reply, but ownership and truth are not the same thing. The words fall heavy. The stenographer pauses for half a second, perhaps to steady her own breath before continuing. The judge adjusts his glasses. We'll reconvene after reviewing the chain of documents. He lifts the gavel. This court stands in recess. The gavel strikes wood, a single echoing sound that feels like a closing heartbeat. I look once more toward my son. He stands slowly, smooth, confident. A small smile touches his lips, the kind that hides victory before it's earned. He stood smiling as they read the first charge. The truth arrived louder than his defense. It began with a hum from the speakers, barely audible, like static finding its voice. Then came his words, low, deliberate, unmistakable. We have to contain her before she talks. Every sound after that collapsed into silence. The entire courtroom froze, time stuttering in disbelief. My protector stood by the playback device, eyes fixed on the judge. This broadcast was recovered from a news outlet's storage, she said, voice even but trembling at the edges. Authenticated, time-stamped, and verified under Media Chain Reference 17C? The sound replayed. Contain her. Before she talks. The chill in the room deepened. I could see it. People pulling their jackets closer, breath slowing, even the fluorescent light dimming slightly, as if justice itself inhaled. The judge leaned forward. Whose voice is that? The prosecutor answered. The defendant's, recorded during a private interview not meant for release. My son stared at the floor. The rhythm of his breathing had changed. Faster, shallower. The same mouth that once called me mother now mouthed denials without sound. Is there context for this statement? The judge asked. He lifted his head finally, meeting the room with an empty calm. You're twisting fragments, he said. I was talking about a company matter, not her. My protector clicked the recorder again. This time, the second part played. She's unstable. If we move fast, we can take everything before she knows it. The cold spread like smoke. I gripped the edge of the bench. Why did you do it? The question slipped out before I could stop it. He turned toward me, expression unflinching. Because they believed me first. The words landed heavier than any sentence could. Around us, reporters scribbled, their pens scratching paper like rain hitting glass. Each line they wrote became a new version of the truth, mine finally louder than his. The judge gestured toward the clerk. Mark that excerpt in transcript entry 17C, full inclusion. Ink moved across the official record. The faint scent of it drifted up, sharp and metallic. I'd never realized before how justice smelled, like paper just pressed, cooling too fast. The prosecutor addressed the bench. Your Honor, the evidence confirms intent to defame and isolate the complainant through premeditated deception. My protector added, and institutional manipulation. The judge nodded slowly. Proceed. I could feel the room's pulse shifting. Each seat behind me seemed alive, breathing, whispering, awakening to what had been done. The microphones on the long table glowed faintly red, their heat cutting the chill for only a second. I remembered that same red light from months ago, the one blinking quietly in the hallway camera as I stood outside my locked home, wondering how my own son could turn memory into a weapon. Now, the record played the truth in his own voice. He rubbed his temples, whispering something only he could hear. "You made me do this," maybe. Or, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." I couldn't tell. But guilt had its own volume. You could hear it without sound. My protector leaned close, her voice low enough for only me to catch. "It's over. Let the system take it now." But justice never arrives fast. It crawls through procedures, pauses in the paperwork, waits for signatures. The judge called for a brief recess. Reporters darted out, phones raised, voices echoing through the corridor. The broadcast tape was carried carefully toward the evidence table, sealed in a case labeled with the cold efficiency of a number. Stayed seated. My hands still trembled against the polished wood, warmth long gone from the surface. A single drop of condensation ran down the side of the water glass beside me. Small, perfect, cold. It mirrored the moment exactly. He sat again, only a few feet away. The distance between us felt wider than continents. "They'll remember you differently now," I said quietly. He didn't answer. The lights above flickered once. The gavel fell, but not hard enough. They posted the verdict where I once hung photos. The hammer struck wood with a sound that didn't belong to justice. It belonged to loss. The notice fluttered for a second, then settled flat against the door. 2 words stamped in heavy ink. "Case closed." The official seal gleamed dull red under the sunlight, wax hardened and final. I stood still, watching strangers walk by, pretending not to look, yet stealing glances from the corner of their eyes. The door had once held photographs, smiling faces, unbroken frames, the illusion of permanence. Now it bore the weight of truth. My arbiter stepped forward, handing me the official copy. "Verdict reference 98A," she said quietly. "Defendant guilty." The paper rasped against my skin, rough as bark, unforgiving. I traced the embossed crest at the top, feeling every ridge and dent, as if touch could make sense of judgment. Behind me, someone whispered, "Finally." Another voice answered, "At what cost?" The neighbors gathered in small clusters, voices flickering between sympathy and gossip. A few clapped quick, polite, almost guilty applause. Others turned away, pretending the notice wasn't there, that none of this had ever echoed through our street. I heard one of them murmur, "She got what she wanted." They were wrong. Justice isn't what you want. It's what's left when everything else is gone. My ally looked at me, eyes steady but tired. "You should keep the original," she said. "You earned it." Earned. The word landed like dust on glass, visible only in light. "I don't know what I earned," I said softly. "A verdict doesn't rebuild a home." She hesitated, then nodded. "No, but it stops the breaking." The wind picked up, lifting the edge of the paper nailed to the door. For a second, I saw the corner of an old photo still taped beneath the wood. A family picture, faded, half hidden. His face was in it. Mine too. The hammer must have gone straight through us. Inside, the room smelled of stillness and paper. The court's copy crackled in my hand, its texture refusing gentleness. I placed it on the table beside the empty picture frame. The light through the curtain hit both objects, the glass and the seal. Same beam, different meanings. My ally lingered near the doorway. "You know," she said, "verdicts don't end echoes. They only name them." "I know." She started to leave, then stopped. "They'll print your story tomorrow. You may want to stay inside." "Let them print," I said. "Let the ink dry over the lies." The house was quiet again after she left. The silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like exhaustion dressed as calm. I ran my fingers along the edge of the verdict, feeling the coarse fibers catch slightly against my skin. The paper wasn't cold, but it carried the memory of coldness, the kind that seeps in when you stand too long before closed doors. For a moment I thought I heard a faint sound outside. Applause again, scattered, then fading. I didn't move to the window. I didn't need to see, because I knew how quickly applause turns to silence, how quickly people forget who you were before your story became a headline. I sat down by the table, the verdict beside me, and looked at the empty frame. Dust settled slowly on the glass, soft as resignation. Justice had spoken, but not softly enough to sound like forgiveness. The door creaked as the wind shifted, brushing against the nailed paper. It whispered against the wood, a dry, rasping sound, like words refusing to rest. Outside, the sun sank lower, gold turning gray. Silence replaced applause too soon. The picture's gone, but the nail still shines. Morning light slips through the blinds in fractured lines, touching the empty wall where family once hung. The frame is still there, weightless now, only a thin outline marking where love used to live. The newspapers arrived before breakfast. Their front pages told the story I'd been waiting years to read. Mother Clear's name after son's scheme. The words were clean, final, triumphant even, yet somehow they didn't feel like victory. On the table, my witness scrolled through an online article, the glow of the screen cutting against the dim kitchen air. "They published the ruling," she said. "Verdict 98A, officially archived." I nodded. "And the comments?" Her thumb paused mid-scroll. "Some people still think you fabricated everything. Some say the court went easy. Others, just move on." "That's the world," I whispered. "It forgets slower than it forgives." She smiled faintly. "But forgetting is its own kind of mercy." Outside, a delivery truck passed by, the sound low and distant. The city was already awake, humming with the indifference of people untouched by my name, my story, my loss. I picked up the newspaper again. The photograph beneath the headline caught me off guard. A picture taken years ago, before the trial, before betrayal. My eyes softer, his arm around me. I wondered who chose that image and if they knew how deep they'd cut by using it. The article praised the court's integrity, mentioned the courageous pursuit of truth. Yet the paragraphs felt cold, procedural. They listed evidence, timestamps, verdicts, numbers, not emotions. They couldn't capture the nights I'd stayed awake counting silence instead of sleep. "Look here," my witness said, pointing to a smaller column near the bottom. "They quoted your final words in court." I leaned closer. I did not vanish. I was erased. Reading it felt like touching a scar you'd forgotten was still tender. The blinds rattled softly in the morning breeze. Sunlight hit the empty picture frame, scattering across the glass like reluctant forgiveness. "You could sue for restitution," she said. "The damages are quantifiable. They'd pay." "No," I answered. "They already paid with their silence." She didn't argue. Instead, she stood and poured another cup of coffee, her movements careful, almost ceremonial. The smell filled the room, rich, grounding, human. It reminded me that life continues, even after public endings. "I'm leaving the city," I said after a long pause. "There's nothing here that belongs to me anymore." She nodded slowly. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere small, somewhere quiet enough to forget the sound of cameras." We shared a moment of stillness. No pity, no advice, just two people acknowledging the cost of truth. When she left, the door clicked shut with a finality I'd been craving. I walked to the wall where the family photos used to hang. Only one frame remained, the one I couldn't bring myself to remove until now. Inside it, the picture had faded, the paper curling at the edges, colors drained by time and guilt. I slid the glass out carefully. The surface caught the light, bending it toward the window, bending it toward tomorrow. The newspaper headline glared from the table. My exoneration had been printed in ink, but ink fades. Truth lives quieter. I placed the empty frame beside the verdict notice and exhaled. The air felt lighter, but not free. Freedom takes time, like healing through the slow silence after applause. Outside, children's voices rose from the street, laughter cutting through the morning like a new language. I stood by the window listening. For the first time in years, I wasn't a name in a headline. I wasn't evidence or accusation. I wasn't erased anymore, just rewritten. Justice left receipts. The bank felt colder than I remembered. Glass, steel, the hum of machines counting what people lost and found. My gatekeeper ally met me near the counter, holding an envelope with both hands as if it were sacred. "Court order executed," he said. "Restitution confirmed." Inside, a check rested on crisp paper. $82,000. The sum I'd watched disappear months ago, siphoned under forged signatures and false affection. Now it had returned, wearing the scent of fresh ink and finality. I held it beneath the sunlight streaming through the window. The light caught the watermark, thin and pure, like a scar healed but not forgotten. "Balance restored," he said with a quiet smile, but numbers couldn't measure what balance meant. Money wasn't the thing I'd lost. It was faith, in family, in fairness, in the small lie that love protects. The check trembled slightly between my fingers. "Does it ever really even out?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Not on paper, only in people." I glanced at the line that bore my name, the same name that once appeared beside the word fraud. Now it followed the word restitution. One replaced the other, but both belonged to me. Outside the window, the street carried on, unaware that justice had just changed ledgers. A woman hurried across the crosswalk, clutching a child's hand. A man leaned on his car horn, impatient. Life kept its own pace, too fast for reflection. "Keep the proof," he said. "You earned it." I folded the paper neatly, sliding it into my bag. "No," I murmured. "I think I'll keep the silence instead." He looked puzzled for a moment, then nodded, as if understanding reached him in pieces. The faint scent of ink still lingered in the air. Sharp, sterile, honest. It mixed with the smell of old paper and something faintly metallic from the pen resting near the register. The smell of endings. For months, my nights had been filled with numbers, balances, dates, case references, debts emotional and otherwise. Now, for the first time, none of them mattered. The ledger was closing, and the arithmetic of betrayal finally tallied to 0. But still, I couldn't stop tracing the edge of the check, my thumb running over its printed texture. Closure is strange that way. It arrives soft, but settles heavy. "Will you deposit it today?" he asked. "Tomorrow," I said. "I want to see how it feels to hold peace for one night." He laughed gently. "You've earned more than that." I turned back toward the window, where sunlight divided the floor into gold and shadow. The glass held my reflection faintly, older, sharper, quieter, the kind of face that's seen its own ruin and still chooses to stand. "Funny," I whispered. "They called it justice, but it feels more like permission to breathe again." He placed a pen beside me. "Sign here," he said softly. I did. The ink flowed clean, no tremor in my hand this time. As I signed, I thought of the ledger that had once belonged to him, my son, filled with deceit dressed as devotion. His handwriting had forged mine, his lies had rewritten love. But this page was mine now, ending in my real script. The sound of the pen tip against paper felt final, like a lock turning for the last time. When the transaction was complete, the teller handed me a printed receipt. Thin, ordinary, almost meaningless. But I kept staring at it. Proof again, in another form. I smiled, folded it once, and tore it neatly in half. Because justice doesn't need receipts once it's felt. It only needs witnesses. I stood by the window a moment longer, watching, sunlight flare against the torn edge, before the pieces drifted into the trash bin beside me. The smell of ink faded, replaced by air, open, faintly warm, almost kind. The gatekeeper nodded once, understanding without words. I left the building lighter, the sound of my footsteps echoing against marble and memory. I tore the last receipt in half. New routes, don't ask about the storm. The garden waited, quiet and patient, behind the house that had seen too many seasons of grief. The soil looked dry at first, unwilling, but when I pressed my fingers into it, it yielded softly, like forgiveness learning its shape. I knelt, hands bare, letting the dirt cling to my skin. It was rough, stubborn, real. For the first time in years, I didn't mind what stayed under my nails. Some stains don't demand to be washed off, they insist on being carried. Neighbors came slowly, one by one, the same faces that once turned away at the grocery store or pretended not to see me in the street. They brought seedlings and silence. Guilt hung between us like humidity. One of them, a woman who used to gossip the loudest, offered a trowel. "It's good to see you out here," she said, her voice fragile, almost rehearsed. "It's good to be seen," I replied. We worked without talking for a while. Every dig into the ground felt like rewriting memory. Every root I buried was a confession the earth agreed to keep. The protector arrived later, carrying 2 cups of tea. He placed one beside me. "Chamomile," he said, "the kind that doesn't pretend to fix anything, just helps you breathe." I smiled faintly. "That's enough." He watched as I laid the last row of seeds. "You could have hired someone," he said. "I could have," I answered, "but then it wouldn't grow from my hands." The air smelled faintly of damp soil and tea. A soft breeze brushed past, stirring the scent of life, simple, grounding. The sound of birds replaced headlines, their rhythm indifferent to history. I looked at the small patch of earth, now striped with lines of promise. "Every wound grows something," I murmured. The protector heard me, but didn't respond. Some truths don't need witnesses, only distance. Later, when everyone had gone, I sat by the garden with my diary. The pages still smelled faintly of smoke and ink, a trace of what had burned before. I opened to a blank one and began to write. Every day counts differently now, not in losses or verdicts, in mornings. The pen dragged slightly against the paper. The texture was uneven, fibrous, real, like the soil itself. I liked that. A robin landed nearby, tilting its head as if inspecting my progress. "You're early," I told it. "Nothing's blooming yet." Still, it stayed, hopping closer, unafraid. Maybe even birds understand that faith isn't about what's visible. It's about what's buried and still alive. The protector's voice echoed from the porch. "You'll need to water it before dusk." "I will," I said, "but not too much. New roots need air as much as care." He nodded, smiling. "You sound like someone who plans to stay." "Maybe I do." He left the cup on the railing, steam still curling upward. The scent reached me again, warm and honest, and I realized that healing doesn't announce itself. It just starts behaving like ordinary life. The sun began to dip, turning the edges of the leaves gold. Shadows stretched across the yard, but none of them felt threatening anymore. I closed the diary and pressed my palm flat against its cover. The grain of the paper met my skin like shared understanding. I looked over the small patch of planted ground. In a few days, sprouts would rise. In a few weeks, color. And in time, maybe peace. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees, and whispered to no one. "He's gone." The robin took flight, vanishing into the distance. The air settled again. Tomorrow's soil will not remember him. The reflection forgave before I did. Morning light filled the room like a patient guest, soft and unhurried. The mirror stood where it always had, unchanged, unblinking, its edges still faintly scratched from the night I first cracked under truth. I used to hate that glass, the way it never lied, the way it showed exactly what I refused to see. Now, I faced it again. My face looked different, not because time had rewritten it, but because shame had finally stopped editing it. The years hadn't softened me, they'd clarified me. The faint lines near my eyes told stories I no longer needed to defend. On the dresser beside the mirror lay an unopened envelope, aged slightly, the paper yellowed at the edges. My handwriting across it was steady, deliberate. I had written it months ago, at the height of everything. "Read this when you are ready," I had told myself. Today, I was. I broke the seal carefully. The paper crackled like a confession finding air. My eyes traced the words I'd once written through anger, then rewritten through understanding. "I forgive you, but I won't forget." The sentence felt both lighter and heavier than I remembered. Forgiveness isn't erasure, it's endurance. The arbiter had told me once, peace isn't a verdict, it's a choice you repeat every day. He'd been right, though it took me this long to understand. The light caught on the mirror's surface again, bending toward me, softer than before. For the first time, it didn't glare. It glowed. I could see the faint reflection of the window behind me, the garden I'd planted, small and green, stubborn against the cold. Life insisting on itself. I touched the edge of the glass. It was cool, not cold. I could see both the woman I was and the one standing now, neither erased, both true. "Are you finally done running?" I whispered. The reflection didn't answer, but her stillness did. Behind me, the clock ticked once, clear, precise, grounding. The sound felt new, though it had been there all along. I'd just been too loud inside to hear it. I thought of the courtrooms, the whispers, the neighbors, the long nights counting silence instead of hours. And yet, somehow, it all led here, to this small, ordinary morning. I turned slightly, catching a beam of sunlight falling across the letter in my hand. The light made the ink shimmer faintly, like it was alive again. I smiled. "Maybe," I said quietly. The mirror was never cruel. Maybe it was waiting. The arbiter's voice returned in memory. "Truth always circles back home." I folded the letter, smoothing its creases. The mirror reflected the motion, two versions of the same gesture, meeting perfectly in sync. For the first time, the symmetry didn't frighten me. I remembered the first time I'd stood here, furious, trembling, unwilling to believe what I saw. I had thought the reflection was my enemy, but it was never the glass that betrayed me. It was the story I'd told myself about what I deserved. Now I understood. The mirror didn't hold judgment, it held continuity. The light shifted again, brightening across the surface. My eyes met my own, steady this time. "I saw my own face," I said softly, echoing the vow that began everything. And this time, I stayed. The words didn't echo back. They settled. I placed the letter on the dresser, its corner catching a glint of light. The reflection mirrored the gesture once more, but I noticed something small, almost imperceptible. I wasn't looking for myself anymore. I was simply with myself. Outside, the wind stirred faintly through the open window. The air smelled of soil and tea. I listened to the rhythm of the house, the creak of wood, the tick of the clock, the hush that comes after long storms. Every sound was alive again, and every silence no longer felt like absence. The mirror no longer watched, it witnessed. I turned once more toward the light. The warmth reached me without asking for permission, touching the same skin that once flinched from truth. I smiled, small, certain. The story ends where truth began.